Guilty until proven innocent. A radio profile of New Zealand's Arthur Allan Thomas case.
Here in this rich dairy farming district called Pukekawa, about 50 kilometres south of the large population centre of Auckland, as you can hear, all sounds peaceful and quiet. The country surrounding this cream brick farmhouse on the bitumen-sealed Highway 22 is picturesque, with rolling green hills, and yet it was here on a cold and wintry Wednesday night, the 17th of June 1970, that 3 shots rang out. 3 shots responsible for a double murder, which would lead to 2 sensational Supreme Court trials, which in turn would challenge the system of British justice as it's practiced here in New Zealand. That challenge still exists to this very day.
The victims of the double murder were farmer Harvey Crew and his wife Jeanette, shot dead as they sat in the lounge room of their farmhouse on the eve of their 4th wedding anniversary. After the pair had been murdered, their bodies were taken from the house and dumped in the nearby Waikato River. Their 18-month-old daughter Rochelle was left unharmed inside the blood-spattered farmhouse. The murders took place on the Wednesday, but no one knew of any strange happenings on the Crew property until the following Monday afternoon, when the father of the dead woman, Len Demler, claims he drove up to see the pair from his neighbouring property. He says when he opened the back door and went in, he found dishes containing the remains of a fish meal on the dining table, but no sign of the couple who had eaten it. He must have also seen the blood stains on the carpet and the dark drag marks where the bodies had been removed. He says he then found the child in her cot, distressed and wearing a pyjama top and a dirty napkin. He then left the child and returned to his own farmhouse without alerting anyone else to what he'd found. Instead, he phoned a stock agent to cancel some trucks that were going to be sent to pick up some sheep from the Crew property. When he found that the agent wasn't available, instead of leaving a message for him, Demler decided to wait until the stock agent returned to the office and returned his call, even though his granddaughter had been left in a distressed condition inside the Crew farmhouse. Eventually, he contacted a neighbour and went back to the house with him to get the child to safety and to alert the police. Then began the search for the missing couple, Harvey and Jeanette Crew. But while most of the farmers in the district scoured the surrounding countryside, Jeanette's father, Len Demler, took no part in trying to locate the pair.
The police had set up search headquarters over there in the wool shed.
David Payne, one of the farmers in the search, remembers seeing Demler riding about the Crew property as hundreds of locals methodically combed the countryside.
The thoughts were, Len, you don't appear to be very concerned.
Demler soon became the chief suspect for the couple's disappearance. A motive established by the police was that Demler's deceased wife, Maisie, had left the farm that he was living on to Jeanette. Added to the intrigue surrounding the case was evidence that someone had fed the baby Rochelle and changed her napkins during the time that she was supposedly left in the house for nearly 5 days after the murders. The police were then told by a young farm worker that he'd seen a tall woman with light brown hair standing inside the front gate on the Crew property on the Friday after the murders had taken place. He'd sighted the woman from a neighbouring farm. A local woman also claims to have seen the child Rochelle toddling up to the Crew farmhouse the next day, the Saturday after the murders. Heading the investigation was Detective Inspector Bruce Hutton. He suspected Len Demler of having committed the double murder. He was never able to prove those suspicions. Today, he's reluctant to discuss the case.
Oh, not really. I'm not in the police now, and the police are doing the inquiries, as I understand, if there's any to be done.
Also reluctant to talk is Len Demler.
No, thanks. I wouldn't bother talking to him.
Hutton does claim that he gave Demler up as a suspect after putting him through a very tough interrogation when Jeanette Crew's body was found floating in the Waikato River near a spot known as Devil's Elbow, 2 months after the murders had taken place. The police investigation continued until the 16th of September, when the body of Harvey Crew was found floating in the Waikato, and then the discovery of an axle, which Hutton claims was found at the same spot, turned the investigation in a different direction. Arthur Allan Thomas grew up on the farm. He was described by a local clergyman as a simple, honest man. He loved the farm life, he loved country music, he loved listening to Johnny Cash records. He had attended the same Pukekawa primary school that Jeanette Crew had. He'd known the woman briefly before she was married, and he willingly told police about that association, even producing a letter she had written to him from England when they came by inquiring about the dead woman. Arthur Thomas was now happily married to an Englishwoman, Vivian, and they were both living on his father's farm about 9 miles from the Crewe farmhouse. Arthur's cousin Peter Thomas also lived on the farm. Following a series of interrogations, Inspector Hutton, who'd turned his attention directly to Arthur Thomas in October, 4 months after the murders, arrested him on November the 11th, 1970. The first Supreme Court trial in February 1971, criticised on the basis that much of the evidence which would have cleared Thomas was suppressed and other evidence allegedly fabricated to convict him, saw Thomas convicted on both counts and sentenced to life imprisonment.
The walls of a prison will never hold me.
Many of those who appeared during that trial claim that Thomas's defence counsel, Paul Tem, was also hampered by the trial judge, Sir Trevor Henry. One of the people making that charge is David Payne.
He checked him. So much so that Paul Tem apologised with these words, "As it pleases your honour." As it pleases your honour. That I was heartily sick of the phrase, "As it pleases your honour," and it still sticks in my gut.
2 years later, after more evidence was uncovered and more public agitation for a new trial had been generated, Thomas was again tried and found guilty. Again, there were allegations of a specially selected jury, and there was a fierce debate over the scientific evidence presented. Over the years, the arguments have continued to rage, and there have been constant calls for an examination of all the evidence. When he recently became eligible for parole, he refused to accept that parole. His father, ALLAN Thomas, says the fight to clear his son's name has been costly for all the family.
I'll first and foremost say that it's wrecked Arthur's mother completely. Some of Arthur's brothers I feel more sorry than I do for Arthur himself, even though that may sound strange. But all the family have been under a long strain. I don't know whether you could call the strain cumulative, but it has gone on now for nearly 9 years, and that's the length of 2 world wars.
So many have ventured an opinion on the Thomas case. The one man who knows the truth is Arthur Allan Thomas. So I went to prison to talk with him. When Thomas appeared, he seemed somewhat taller than I had imagined him to be. His dark hair, now greying slightly at the sides, was shoulder length, to protect him from the cold southerlies that sweep across the farm, he later revealed, but his whole manner was open and friendly. I asked him how he felt at this stage, after being imprisoned for 8 years for crimes he claims he didn't commit.
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. Quite a bit of faith in Uncle Rob and not.
Of course, by this time you'd feel, pretty bitter about things.
Oh, well, I am. What has happened, but I'll look around the fact, get my name cleared, full stop,
That's your one intention?
Yeah, only one.
He was telling me that he still had faith in the members of the retrial committee, which was formed in mid-1971, following his first Supreme Court trial, where he was found guilty.
Do you think the retrial committee could do a lot better by concentrating on trying to find evidence against the person responsible?
Oh, they've got no shot. No. They haven't got the powers that the police have got.
Sure.
They can tap phones and motor cars, run on taxpayers' money and run around and slip things out and put search warrant on people and all this. Well, the committee can't do that.
Thomas was explaining that the committee couldn't match the powers of a police investigation in establishing someone's guilt. But I reminded him that as far as the public is concerned, it was a very thorough police investigation that had led to establishing his guilt.
How are you going to convince them, or how do you expect them to believe that you're innocent after all that?
Well, once the facts, they accept the facts of the case, then no doubt they would believe in my innocence.
Don't you think a lot of people already feel that you've had a fair hearing?
No, yeah, at the moment, yes. But once they accept the facts from the whole case, and they go my way and my name cleared, then they will say, oh, there has been a miscarriage of justice.
I then put it to him that because so much evidence had been put forward at 2 Supreme Court trials and considered by the Court of Appeal, that it would be difficult for people to see the miscarriage of justice that he claims has occurred.
I know I'm innocent. The evidence is there that proves my innocence. The cartridge case, the axle, the wire, those are the ones that convicted me, and they are the ones that has to be looked at again.
But firstly, there was the cartridge case, which Thomas alleges was planted on the Crewe property before being discovered by police 4 months after the murders, despite 2 previous police searches of the property for evidence.
Yes, it's been planted, I know that.
But how can you prove that now that it's gone?
Well, no, we have still got big photographs of the Exhibit 350. That distinguishes the fact that it was made at that particular time. And the bullets that found in the crew's heads had a number 8 lead, which come from older cartridges, and that's a fact. You can't overcome it. The Court of Appeal, when they turned it down, they said, well, there's a particular hob missing, and this created a bit of a doubt that it still may have contained the fatal bullets. Now, we've got evidence to prove that the hob has been found, and this particular part of the case is conclusive now that it didn't contain the fatal bullets on dates of manufacturing.
The cartridge case that Thomas is referring to and that the police found on the Crewe property 4 months after the murders took place has been described as the most discredited court exhibit in New Zealand's history. But why would the cartridge case have been planted?
That's your job, get somebody in behind bars. That's number 1. Who it is, well, he'll have to take his peck, and he took me. No murder solved unless someone goes behind bars.
Another vital piece of evidence was the axle police say they found on the riverbed at the spot where the body of Hauraki was recovered from the Waikato River. Police allege that stub axles they found on a dump at the Thomas farm 4 months after the murders fit the axle found in the Waikato. The Crown has contended that the axle belonged to Thomas's father and had been on the farm when Thomas decided to use it to weigh down the body of Harvey Crewe when it was dumped in the Waikato. But Arthur Thomas says he can prove that the axle was not on the farm at the time of the Crewe murders.
What strong evidence do you have, Arthur?
Well, that's 5 affidavits to prove that I didn't have possession of that axle.
Does that mean you can prove someone else had it?
It was taken off the farm before to go to the farm.
Also attached to Harvey Crewe's body was some wire which the police alleged must have come from the Thomas farm.
Discrepancies between the scientists on the wire, particularly the copper additives that they mixed with the wire. There's a difference there. So that's showing some doubt on the case on the British justice. There's doubt there, so it should be thrown out.
Another strong point that the Crown tried to establish during both trials was a jealousy motive because of Thomas's involvement with Jeanette Crewe before she was married. Thomas admits he was fond of Jeanette Crewe at one stage, but says the police tried to make more out of the association than there really was.
They changed the statement to say that I said I had great passion for her. No, that's what they told the jury.
Yeah. But even
what I told the police, then they built it up to get the conviction again.